Welcome to the Generic Crafting Tutorial series. In this first episode, we're going to go ahead and get our project all set up. I'm going to be using Unreal Engine 5.4, but you can use whichever engine type you want. Most of this is going to translate over just fine. So we're going to open up a new third-person project, and I'm going to name this Generic Crafting Demo. Yeah, we're not going to use our starter content here, and that should be good. Okay, now that we have our project open, I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder. I'm going to call it Generic Crafting, and this is where we're going to do all of our stuff is going to be right in here. So I'm going to make another new folder called Maps, and I'm going to create a level. But I actually want to use this, so I'm going to go File, New Level. That way I can just get this basic level. Great, now we have a basic level set up. I'm going to save that. And Generic Crafting, Maps, Generic Level, or whatever you want to call it. That's perfectly fine. Now I'm going to go into my Edit, Project Settings. We're going to be here a lot. I'm going to go into my Maps and Modes, and I'm going to make this my generic level. That way when I open up the editor, it's going to start right on this generic level, and I don't have to go through and mess around too much with anything else. Now I'm going to also go ahead and create another new folder here, and we're just going to call this defaults or something like that. And that's just to kind of clean this up. I'm going to move all this stuff over. This is just kind of a personal preference for me. I'm going to go to the third person. I'm just going to delete the third person example map that this comes with. Our input is pretty important. I'm going to need that. And I'm also going to need to create a copy of this third person blueprint here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to Control C that. Come over to my generic crafting and make another new folder. I'm going to call that player. And I'm going to go ahead and paste that third person character in here and rename it BP player or whatever you want. I'm also going to make one more asset in here. Blueprint class, player controller, PC custom, or you could do PC crafting game or whatever you want, but I'm just going to use custom since we'll only have one player controller here. I'm also going to take this input folder from the third person, and I'm going to move that right over to player, that way we have all of our inputs. And now I can go ahead and delete both of those. Well, first let's go into our generic crafting. We'll make another new folder called game, and this is where I usually keep my core game data. And we're going to make a blueprint class of game mode. Let's use game mode base. And we'll call it GM custom. You could call it crafting game or whatever you want. If you're going to be using multiples, then you might want to do something other than custom. Now we have our GM custom. Just going to open it up, go into the class defaults, switch my player controller to PC custom. And we'll just switch this to player. It doesn't really matter too much. We'll compile, save that. We'll go in here and change our game mode to our game mode custom. Give that a save. And now I can get rid of this game mode safely since it's not referenced anywhere. Delete all these folders. I'm going to take level prototyping as well. I don't need any of these cubes or prototype materials. Yeah, none of this is really relevant to me. So I'm going to go ahead and delete all of it. And technically I could get rid of this UE4 mannequin, or I could get rid of these characters. But what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to place this inside my player folder, that way it's out of the way and we can get rid of this defaults folder entirely. Okay, now that we have all that stuff done, I'm going to right click on my content folder, and I'm going to update all my redirector references. This is just kind of something you want to do periodically to keep everything nice and clean. So now we have our player controller custom, and our game mode. We haven't really done much of anything in here, just kind of setting it all up. So I'm going to make a couple more things while I'm at it, since we're going to need them later on. I'm going to make my blueprint class inside of the game folder here. And this is going to be my game instance. So I'm going to search all classes for game instance. And I'm going to call this GI custom, just like everything else. I'm going to make one more thing in here called the save game, which is going to be my save custom, because we're going to be saving a lot of stuff as we kind of go along through this. One more thing I want to make, that way we have everything nice and centralized when we're doing all of our functionality throughout this. It's called the blueprint function library. I'm going to call this bpfl custom. And this is just a nice place to put functions that are going to be needed across multiple actors. So the very first thing I want to do in here is just set up my game instance. So inside of our game instance, we're going to go ahead and build this out just to get it out of the way, because we only have one function in here and one event. So our game instance is persistently loaded. It's probably one of the most important objects inside of your game, but it's also very dangerous because it's very easy to bloat this or to add custom structures, which can cause it to fail. So we're not going to be doing too much in here. Okay? All we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a new function. And we're going to call this create. If I can spell today. CreateSaveGame. I spelled it wrong. Game. And this is going to do exactly what you would think it is going to do. It's going to say, does save game exist? We're going to promote this slot name to a variable. I'm going to call it default. You can call it whatever you want. Promote it to a variable. Call it save slot. Now that we have our save slot, we compiled and saved, its value is going to be default. If you didn't set default in here before you promoted it, then go ahead and type default or whatever you want to save, whatever you want your save slot to be in that variable. That way you just kind of always have it. And we don't really need to do this, but it helps. Now we're going to load game from slot on true. By the way, if you want to easily create branches, you can just pull out of here and click B, and it'll create a branch for you. So if our save game does exist, okay, we are going to load the game from the slot. We're going to take this return value and cast it to our save custom. And we're going to promote this to a variable, because we're going to need this throughout basically the entire game all the time. So we'll promote that to a variable, and we'll call this save game. And I want to return here. No, I don't use this return often, but I do want to have a return node here. So we're going to come in here, we're going to type return to get our return node. And I'm just going to pass this right into the return node. And this is going to be my save game ref. I'm not sure we'll need this at all, but I like to have the return of the valid save ref here, just in case I do need it later on. So off of the false, we're going to say, does save game exist? Well, if save game does not exist, we need to create save game object. Our game class is going to be that save custom class we just made. We don't actually need to cast, because this is getting the valid save. If we were to cast, it would probably say something like we don't need to cast. Yeah, see, we'll get that note that says we don't need to cast, because this return value here is already the same save game. So what we're going to do is duplicate that, and we're just going to put this down here. That way we are always setting our save game reference to the valid save game, and we're always getting that reference back in the return node. Okay? And that's all we're going to do here. This is create the save game. So it creates that object and handles it. Now in our event graph, we are going to make a custom event called TrySaveGame. And this is how we are going to save the game anytime we need to actually save the save game reference. Now we're not going to be writing or reading data from the game instance. The game instance is only creating that save game object and telling the object when it needs to save. So all we're going to do here is we're going to get our save game. We're going to run an isValid to make sure that we have a valid save game. Okay. If it is not valid, we need to drag our CreateSaveGame in here. And we don't need to use this for anything, because remember, we're already setting it inside the CreateSaveGame. Now we're going to drag this into a branch, and this branch is going to be our async condition. And this is so that we can have async or non-async. So I'm going to take that condition all the way over to the custom event, and I'm going to say async. That way, whenever I call my TrySaveGame from anywhere in the world, I'll have this condition, which if I compile, save, refresh, I always forget to do that. It'll say async, so if we want to have an async save, we'll select yes. If we don't want to have an async save, we want to make sure that everything gets saved nice and hard, we'll select no. And we're going to make sure that our TrySaveGame also calls into this branch. That way, whenever we hit this branch, we have a valid save game object. Okay? We're going to get our save game object out here. And we're also going to need our slot. We can control get that if we want. Or just drag out and say get. From our true, meaning we do want to have an asynchronistic save here, we're going to say async save game to slot. And from true, I'm going to put that slot in there. And this shouldn't actually be world context. Sometimes it does that when you drag out of it. If we refresh, that world context will go away. And boom, now we have this. So I'm going to print a string here. And this string is going to say saving, just so that we have something displayed. We'll go through later and add the event log, which you saw in the tutorial series, always in the HUD down in the lower left. That kind of also logs strings, but shows them in a way that's just easier for me to read. Personally, it's something I like doing in my debug HUD. I don't usually do much in my debug HUD, but it's something I like doing. And then we're also going to come in here, and we are going to say append, and off of completed, we're going to append select. That way success comes in here. So if it's success, if it's fail, and we're going to say saved game. Again, we're going to go through later and probably make event logs out of all this stuff. But that is the async save game to slot. So now anywhere in the world that we want to call our save game with an async, we can just go ahead, get the game instance, cast to it, and call our save game. That way it's always here, it's always valid, and always relevant. More or less the same thing off of false, except for async, we're going to do non-async. So we're just going to save game to slot. I'm going to pull out our save game object and our slot name. Straighten those up a little bit. We're going to do the same thing here. And we'll just add, async here. And make sure you add, make sure you add a space if you want there to be a little space afterwards. Not like it really matters too much. And that's our game instance, okay? That is all we are going to be doing in here. Nothing else. We're just going to have our CreateSaveGame and our TrySaveGame. That's it. We can close out of this. We're done. Until we make our event log anyway. Now I'm going to go into my project settings again. I'm going to go into my maps and modes. And where we have our game instance class here, I'm just going to make this my GI custom. That way that's all set up. We don't have to come back here in a later episode. Alright, now I'm going to do two things in my bpfl custom in order to handle the save that we just made inside of the game instance. So I'm going to make two functions here. One is going to be called GetValidSaveGameRef. And the other is going to be called TrySaveGame. We're going to make a category for these because we really want to keep this bpfl nice and organized. There's going to be a lot of stuff in here. Called Save Game, or you could just call it Save. I'm going to call mine Save Game. I'm going to add both of those to those categories. So let's start with TrySaveGame since it's the simplest. TrySaveGame is more or less going to do the same thing we just did in the game instance, but we're going to be calling the game instance and casting to it from here. And this just makes it a little bit easier to save the game from anything that needs to call this. So we're going to get our game instance, We're going to cast it to the GI custom. I'm going to say TrySaveGame. And that's all. Okay. Plug that right in there. Now, if you wanted to, we should have a slightly different name here, so we could say bpfl, TrySaveGame. Let's just do the same thing here. I usually don't worry too much about this, but we'll make sure that we're nice and consistent with it. Everything in the bpfl will just have bpfl in front of it. That way it's kind of better. Because if we have TrySaveGame here and TrySaveGame here, there's a non-zero chance that we'll mess something up eventually. That's not likely, but it's a non-zero. So we're going to make sure we have our async incoming from this TrySaveGame. We're going to get async just so it's a little bit cleaner in our graph here. This is this same variable. Inside of a function, you can just grab it and plug it right in. And we're going to try to save the game. That's all we're going to do here. Okay, nice and easy on the bpfl TrySaveGame. Again, this is just so that we don't have to get the game instance and cast to the game instance anytime we want to try to save the game inside of the world. So no matter what actor is trying to run this TrySaveGame, we'll just call bpfl TrySaveGame, and it'll just be this async, and we can just call it. Nice and easy. Now GetValidSaveGameRef. This is largely going to be for loading. So when we are trying to load a value from the save game, we need to make sure that we have a valid reference to the save game. So we don't need any input values here. We're just going to get our game instance, cast to GI custom. Whoop. We're going to get the save game. So get save game, and this is getting that variable reference that we made. We're going to promote that to a local variable just so everything is nice and clean. We're going to call this local save. Whoops. Disregard what was typed there. I think I'll get a copyright or a ban if I actually say it. So we're going to have our local save here. We're going to run that to an isValid, just to make sure that this save is valid, because remember, this is GetValidSaveGameRef. We absolutely do not want to return an invalid save. So if it's not valid, okay, we need to get our game instance. I'm going to press R to reroute these. That way it's a little bit cleaner. And we'll queue them up. Queue to straighten. Create. Save game. If I can type today. So if it's not valid, we're going to call the game instance to make sure that we create that save game. And then we're going to use this pin right here that comes off of it to set our local save game. And then we're going to return from both of these our local save game. So not this one, because remember, if we are invalid and it's calling this, then yeah, it'll work. But if it is already valid, then this local save that just got set up here is going to be the one that gets used, and not this one down here, because this one never got called. So we're going to plug that right in there. That way we're always getting the local save, the last local version. That way either this one or this one, whichever one is actually valid, is going to be the one that we're returning here on our return node. We're going to call this save game. Okay. So I know it seems a little weird to be doing this first, but I kind of wanted to get all of the saving and loading functionality out of the way now. And I will show you real quick why we are doing that. If I go into my player, and I want to say, let's say we have a value called health. We'll just, generic health. I misspelled health. Generic float of health. And inside of our save game, I'm going to end up deleting this, but this is just an example to quickly show why we're doing it. Inside of our save game, we're going to have health. Float of health. Make a function called set health. That's just going to set health based on the input of health. So let's say we want a custom event called save health or set health or whatever. Let's just, save health. We're not actually going to be using this. This is just an example of how this functionality we just made is going to be used throughout the entire game. So yeah, we're going to make this save health custom event a health variable inside of our player and a health variable inside of our save with a set health function inside of our save. And again, we're not actually going to be using this. This is just to kind of show how we are going to be using these functions we just made later on. That way you have an understanding. So save health is going to get our current health variable. We are going to take this bpfl function called GetValidSave. So bpfl GetValidSaveGameRef. Okay, and that's going to, again, return our save game. We're going to drag off of here. We're going to set our health. That way that the save game reference is setting its own variable. Something that's kind of important most of the time is that the save game object is internally setting and not externally. Like if we were to say set health, there's a non-zero chance that this would fail to actually set the health. Sometimes it'll succeed, most of the time it'll fail, especially with complex variables later on. So I just find it better that in save games we make these kind of setter functions that make sure that the game itself is setting its own variable. So we're going to do that. Now we have our valid save game. It's setting its own health. Something I like to do is delay until next tick. That way, pretty much no matter what, it has settled inside of health. Because if I call save right now, there's, again, a non-zero chance that it won't actually save. So we're going to say bpfl TrySaveGame. We're going to make this async. And I'm going to go ahead and make a custom event here called print health and load health. Just so, again, we can see this kind of working in real time to make sure that it's working. We will delete all this stuff later on. You don't really have to follow along if you don't want to. So inside of our event begin play, I'm going to call load health. That way we're just loading up our health in the event begin play. Load health is going to get this bpfl save game ref. It's going to get our health. And we're going to set our player's health to that health. And I'm going to go ahead and print a string. Not duration. Duration, good, 2 seconds. And we're just going to print that health value as a string. So whatever we set the health to, when we load up the game, is going to load this. We're going to just say change health. And change health is going to do this as well. It's going to set our health. We're just going to get a random float. Between 0 and 100. And then we're going to save. Okay. And we're going to use key 1 to change our health. Again, this is not something we're actually going to use. This is something that I'm just kind of setting up. That way we see this working in real time. Make sure everything's kind of working before we move on. So if I press play, I've got my character in here. We saw the health was 1. And that's set. If I press 1, it's 2.86, 77, 20. We'll leave off on 67.473. We'll play. And we've got our health of 67.4. Okay. So that's pretty simple. That's pretty much all we're going to be doing. Just every single thing that we end up needing in this save game is going to be handled just like that. I'm going to add a comment here just so the save game doesn't dereference itself. And I'm also going to delete all this since we don't actually need health for anything. Delete that. And compile, save everything. So those are our save game functions. Our game instance is all set up now. And our basic how we are going to save and load everything during gameplay is all set up now. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. We've got our game instance all set up, and we've got most of our core game objects created and ready to manipulate. In the next video, we're going to be making our debug HUD and our event log. That way we don't have to rely on print strings for everything that we do in the game. We'll have a nice little scroll box to scroll through and see everything that has happened since we started and until we finished.